Hi, everyone. My name is George Poo, and welcome to the first episode of Builders World podcast, where I'm joined by exceptional entrepreneur Caleb Avery, who's the founder and CEO of Teal. So first of all, Caleb, thank you so much for joining the show today, and super excited to have you on.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm excited to be on the inaugural episode. That's pretty exciting.
Thank you so much. And super excited to talk about your company, Teal, and just overall your entrepreneurial journey. So before we dive into Teal, I'm really curious to learn about, Caleb, your background and how did you started in entrepreneurship. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, certainly. So, my entrepreneurship journey started at 19 in Greenville, South Carolina, going door to door, selling credit card processing services to small business owners. And, certainly didn't start that thinking it was going to be this grand, business that we were building out. I think initially the plan was more, how do we get beer money? We were in college, but as we started to get out there and started talking to small business owners, I think we just realized how big the pain point was with their credit card processing solutions and how frustrated they were with the existing options. And as time went on, certainly turned into something much bigger than the way it started.
Yeah, you talk about door-to-door sales, and I think a lot of founders, including myself, doesn't have the experience. So what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, not comfortable at first. I think it's just the honest, reality. But as you get used to it and you start just basically forcing yourself to go out every day and say, hey, I've got to hit 20, I've got to hit 25 doors today. You start to get these good interactions and these good conversations where business owners thank you for coming in. And as you have those positive experiences, that kind of feeds you to say, hey, I want to go back tomorrow. And then obviously as you start to earn money and generate revenue from it, you get this positive reinforcement, but it's tough. In the early days, you get the door slammed on you, you get people yelling at you. I mean, I could go on and on with some of the stories, over the years from business owners that were less than thrilled to have yet another, credit card processing agent, walking in their door. But the reality is, if you commit to it and have that, repetition, eventually it's something that, you get.
That's awesome. So what was the pain point that you saw back then with the business owners in general?
Certainly. So, in that first business, we were going out and primarily working with, brick and mortar, restaurant, retail, liquor store, salons. And a lot of these small business owners were working with these behemoth, public companies. Yeah. They were working with, TSYS. They were working with First Data. They were working with WorldPay. And the reality was they were paying too much for credit card processing. And oftentimes they had a 1-800 number, and that was the only way that they were able to get a hold of anyone. And so if the terminal breaks, God forbid, you've got to call this 1-800 number and sit on hold for, hour and a half, trying to get a hold of somebody. Meanwhile, you can't run your business. You can't accept credit cards, you can't make sales. And so, the idea was that we were coming in and, allowing these small business owners to save money on their credit card processing. They had a cell phone number, that they could call, for, support and just really offering them a much better experience than they had, working with these behemoth institutions.
That's awesome. And we're going to get back to that in a minute. So now I want to talk more about, your prime company, which is a super exciting company called Teal. So can you share more about, what Teal does to our audience?
Certainly. So, Tilt's platform, we call it PayFac-as-a-Service, and really, was born out of this need for integrated payment solutions for software platforms. And so, our primary customers are people like dental software platforms, golf course management platforms, gym management platforms, property management solutions. And these software platforms needed to be able to embed payments within their solution so that, the dentist or the golf course or the gym would be able to accept payments. But really, the idea behind PayFac-as-a-Service was born out of two big problems. One was the onboarding experience for their customers. And so Tilt solves that by offering an instant digital onboarding experience for these businesses. So, that dentist doesn't have to fill out, a 6-page PDF and print it and sign it and scan it and send it back with a driver's license, a copy of their baby, a voided check, previous processing statements. And so just making it easy for their customers to sign up for their solutions. And then the other thing is offering that software platform a share of the revenue. And so it becomes a very substantial recurring revenue stream for their business. And so by packaging together, this incredible technology, this modern onboarding experience, and then this, very exciting revenue stream, that's kind of the crux of the idea behind PayFac-as-a-Service.
Okay. I think PayFac-as-a-Service is such a wonderful term. So first of all, did you guys invent the term?
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
So, we went through a process, and this was probably, 2 years ago, of just really thinking through the market and the existing options and how could we differentiate ourselves, away from the other options in the market and really help people understand what the product was that we were offering. And after a pretty lengthy process and a lot of input, from different people, we came to this idea of PayFac-as-a-Service. I think, we're certainly thankful that we came up with that term because I think it really perfectly embodies the spirit behind what we do.
Okay, awesome. And I think PayFac just means, payment facilitating as a service, right? So that's like the full name of it.
Yeah, so PayFac is short for payment facilitator, which is something that I believe WorldPay has the trademark on the shortened acronym of PayFac, but definitely something that people in the industry are pretty familiar with these days.
That's awesome. So let's talk a little bit more about your customers, because it sounds like what you just told me, Caleb. Your customers are primarily enterprise customers. So like the bigger, can you tell us more about who they are?
Yeah, good question. So certainly didn't start out thinking that we were going to be targeting these enterprise platforms. When we put together the first pitch deck and we're really thinking about the first customers that we were designing this solution for, initially we were thinking that we were going to be targeting customers between about 25 million and 500 million a year was kind of the initial, sweet spot 2.5 years ago as we started thinking through, the go-to-market motion. But the reality was, as we started to get into market and started to get inbound, customers coming and talking to Tild about the problems that they were experiencing with integrated payments, the customers were a lot larger than, we originally thought. And I think, in the first couple of months of being live at the platform, we had something like 20 enterprise customers with over $1 billion come inbound to us, reaching out to us on our website or reaching out to me on LinkedIn, just saying like, hey, we need help with our integrated payment solution. And so, we're primarily focused on mid-market platforms, but I think our definition of mid-market has expanded over the years, where now, we would say our kind of core sweet spot is about 50 million a year, up to about 2 billion in annual processing is really the sweet spot for Tild. Not to say that we don't like working with startups. We got plenty of startups that leverage our platform, and certainly we love, our enterprise customers and have a number of clients that process, well over that $2 billion mark. But the sweet spot and the core focus for us from a product and design perspective has always been this mid-market software company that I think have been left behind by a lot of the existing solutions available in the market before.
I agree so much. And one question I will always like to ask every entrepreneur is, what's the initial idea of your company? So was there anything inspired you to start Tild? What's the process look like?
Of course. So, for me, between my ISO and Tild, I was doing a lot of consulting work with software platforms, as well as actually investing in software platforms. And so I really just kept seeing the exact same problem over and over again with the clients that I was consulting with and with the companies that I was investing in, where they just weren't really satisfied for a number of reasons with the existing options on the market, be it, Stripe, Square, Braintree, be it TSYS, WorldPay, First Data. There just were problems with those existing options. And, at the time, I just couldn't believe that there wasn't an option that offered kind of the best of both worlds between the existing solution. So, after seeing the same problem, a couple dozen times, felt like, hey, maybe there's a market here to go build something out, and finally decided to start put my money where my mouth was and started to.
Yeah, that's an excellent journey. And you talk about like companies with billions of dollars of annual, let's say, processing volume coming to you inbound. So you guys must be solving like a really, really painful problem. Like, what do you think the value, like let's say top 1 or 2 value Tild bring to your customers?
Certainly. So, for a lot of these enterprise customers, the 2 big things that they're frustrated with, one is the technology experience that they have with their current partner, and then 2 is the onboarding experience. And those are kind of hand in hand. But from a technology perspective, the problem with a lot of the existing solutions, it's pretty painful to get up and running. It can oftentimes take months to actually get interest to get integrated. And then even when you do, from like a reporting perspective, some of the publicly traded payments companies, the reporting experience for their integrated platforms is literally logging into a portal and downloading a CSV file, and that's the only way to get access to the data, which for developers and software engineers, certainly not the preferred experience. And so being able to offer them a reporting API where they can attach metadata and key value pairs to some of the key pieces of information on the platform creates a much more modern experience than oh, Susie, can you go log in and download that CSV file and send it to Frank because we got to do reporting this week. And so that solves a pretty fundamental pain point. And then the onboarding experience, I think, is the other big one where a lot of these big companies, we've got a couple of clients that have say 5,000 customers that use their like SaaS software, but only 1,000 of those customers have actually signed up for their integrated payment solution. And it's because they're asking them to fill out PDF documents and send back supporting documentation and wait a couple of weeks to get their applications approved. And it's just not this seamless integrated experience that I think these platforms and their customers are really striving for. And so we offer them that modern technology coupled with that improvement in the experience for their customers through that streamlined onboarding.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I do want to talk about like your experience in the payment industry in general, because people say that if you spend too much time in one industry, you become an absolute expert. And I know, Caleb, you're in the payment industry when you started your first business till now has been 10 years in payments. What are the biggest things that you learned from 10 years in payments?
Certainly. I think one of the biggest shifts that I've seen over the course of the 10 years, and part of what's created this opportunity for Till, when I got started, more than 10 years ago, it was really all about traditional payments. There really weren't a lot of like software-led vertical software options available for small business owners. And so if you were a small business owner, wanting to get access to credit card processing, you talked to somebody like myself when I walked in, the door of your business. You weren't going online and looking for, Toast and MindBody in these companies, primarily didn't exist. There weren't very many vertical software platforms 10 years ago, whereas, you fast forward to today, and software-led payments are increasingly eating into, the payments landscape and sucking up market share from, the legacy incumbents. And that shift has been pretty exciting to watch. But when you look at, the options that are available to, these software platforms, they're still leveraging a lot of the same technology that was available 10 years ago from TSYS and from First Data and from, WorldPay. And like the reality is the world has changed, and the needs of merchants and the needs of platforms, has changed. And so I think, I certainly have the perspective of kind of where, things have been and like to think that I kind of see where, things are going and are trying to build more for where I think, the world is headed versus, where the world has been.
Yeah, of course. That's just awesome experience. And when speaking of payments, I think many of us in tech, the first thing that we think about is Stripe. And I know, Caleb, I think I'm not sure if you mentioned Stripe is not really your direct competitor, but I'm sure it gets brought up to you a lot. So tell us what's the difference between Stripe and Till, because I think there are so many differences out there.
Certainly, yeah. I think Stripe comes up in almost every conversation, with investors, and certainly comes up, a lot with customers. And I think Stripe has built a fantastic business. They're $100 billion company, so no one can argue that it's not a great product. I think that the question is, who is it a great product for? And when you look at the history of their business, they've primarily been targeting e-commerce, merchants, which is not Tilt's focus. Yeah. And so when you look at their solution relative to ours, we have really tailor-built a solution for software platforms. And so a couple of the big differences, one from a white label perspective, we really give these software platforms the tools to have almost right out of the box a complete white label experience so that they can have their brand front and center, to their customers, which really is not the Stripe model. From an economics perspective, As much as I keep hearing that Stripe is moving in the direction of offering, more margin to software platforms, the reality is I just haven't seen it. And so, we certainly are offering a much more exciting, revenue share opportunity to the software platforms. I think one of the biggest points of differentiation is in our omni-channel experience. And, when I say omni-channel, for those of you that aren't, payments nerds like myself, I'm talking about the ability to both process card not present, online transactions, invoice, virtual terminal, hosted payment page, but also actually have a physical terminal in, the doctor's office or the gym or, the golf course. And the reality is Stripe just hasn't to date brought a solution to market from a card present perspective that really solves a lot of the pain points that these software platforms have. And so, we are filling, I think, a pretty big gap, in the market, offering this true omni-channel solution for software platforms, where for a number of our clients, the majority of their payments are processed through a terminal, in the physical location. And so, that has been a pretty big differentiator for us, and certainly, brought in a good portion of the customers that we've signed up, since launching last year.
And I think, like, for myself, like as a startup founder, I've been using Stripe, so I do think it's an amazing service. But I do think, like, in terms of savings and getting the money that we process, of getting a part of that coming back to us, I just don't see it, haven't seen that yet. And personally, I don't see that happening maybe for the next couple of years. So I think you guys are providing a lot of value by giving, I'm assuming it's giving a portion of that money back to the facilitator to pay your customers yourself, right? Is that correct? Wait to us.
Yeah, so the Tilt model is based upon this concept of a revenue share. And so if you think about from a software company perspective, let's say, you're a golf course management, platform, and you've got, 700 golf courses processing $100 million in transactions. Well, on Stripe, your customers are paying $3 million in processing fees, and that $3 million goes to Stripe. You don't really know how much margin Stripe's making. There's not a lot of transparency there, but in the Tilt model, the idea is that out of that, $3 million in processing fees, it probably only costs, let's say, 2% or $2 million to actually process all of those credit card transactions. And so there's this like $1 million of revenue that's available. And, certainly our model is predicated on sharing the lion's share, of that $1 million in revenue with the software platforms that choose to partner.
And I see this model, like I personally see this model being the future, because even when I'm talking with small business owners, in DC, New York, different places, all they complain, even like the coffee shops and, the printer shops, all they complain about is that they have to pay 3 to 4% to payment processors. And it's so painful for small businesses. And I think people are already coming in and solving this problem, right? But I'm assuming it's way, way more painful, I'm assuming, for larger businesses who are processing so much volume, who have so much left on the table. So what was their experience when you talk to them and say, hey, we can offer this? Do they just don't believe such thing exists? Too good to be true?
There's definitely sometimes the attitude of like, tell me more. It sounds too good to be true. But the reality is, you kind of peel back the onion and dive into the problems that these software platforms are experiencing. They're either upset that they're not earning revenue off of the crazy rates that their customers are paying, or they're actually unable to sign some of their customers that are just unwilling to pay 2.9% and 30 cents. And so to your point about the small business owner being frustrated, a lot of these small business owners are just saying, like, look, we're not willing to pay 2.9% 30 cents. We've got a terminal here from TSYS and we pay 2.5%. Why would we all of a sudden now pay 3.2% or something to process our credit card transactions? And so by giving these platforms the flexibility to price at different price points for their customers, not only are you creating this new revenue stream, but you're actually unlocking new customers that want to work with them. But with the existing pricing models and existing solutions that they had before, they were physically unable to sign up some of the customers that trust them and are on their platform for their payment solution. And so it's definitely exciting to be able to open up those types of opportunities for our customers to really bring a solution to market that fits the needs of all of their customers, not just a subset that are willing to pay, exorbitant rates for credit card processing.
And I think Teal's model, I think your story is it's a very positive signal to those entrepreneurs who wanted to start a payment business. Because when I used to want to start a payment business, everyone's like, oh, but you're too late. Stripe already does that. Square already does that. So it just kind of feels discouraging not to start something just because someone has already done it. And I mean, Caleb, your company, you've already built this and it's growing fast. So I think it counters the notion that everything is too late to start. What do you think on this?
I think the key is to find a niche and find a gap, in the product set of your competitor. Just because their business exists and is, seemingly doing well on paper doesn't mean that they've solved, the problem for every single customer that exists in the market. And so, find that gap, find the niche. And then the question is that niche big enough to build a business that's exciting for you and exciting for employees and exciting for investors? And if the answer is still yes, then it doesn't really matter, if you're late to the party. In some ways, I feel like we had a huge advantage coming into the market when we did, because we had the benefit of seeing what Stripe built, and seeing what FinX had tried to build, and seeing what these competitors had brought to market, and then going out and talking to customers and saying, well, what do you not like about these various solutions? And then we tailor built a product knowing exactly what the issues and pain points were with customers in the market with the existing solutions. And so I mean, frankly, in some ways, I think being late to the party can be a pretty big advantage if you use that advantage strategically.
And I think you guys not only did innovation, you're not just using the same tech and do it again and focusing on niche. You did a business model innovation, as I understand it, and you did a technology innovation, as I understand it too. So it's not just processing payments; it's way more. So can you talk a little bit more about the way more that you guys have done?
Yeah, I think when we first got started, we weren't necessarily intending for it to be as ambitious of a build out as it ended up being. But I think as we got into the process of talking to customers and building out the solution and researching the market, we started to realize how big the opportunity was for us to get into the space. Plus, we've been fortunate to raise a reasonable amount of capital for the business, which really allows us the opportunity to build things in a different way. Where when I was financing a lot of the early days of the business, you kind of have to make different choices. Whereas now we're in a position where we're very well capitalized. We're able to bring in incredible talent into the business and I think build things in a different way. And from a business model innovation perspective, it was innovative in the sense that we went a different direction than any of the other fintech platforms, but in a way we kind of copied the business model that's been working in the legacy channels for decades, frankly. And so we kind of brought an existing business model that had been working, quite well in other markets, and brought that into this space. And so it looks innovative because it's different than what any of our competitors are doing. But it's really a tried and true model that we brought to the table with modern technology and a new approach. And at this point, certainly seems like the market appreciates the combination of puzzle pieces that we brought together.
Certainly. And I think you mentioned something very interesting, is that early days, right? So early days is very different from having funding, and you mentioned having to put a lot of money yourself, which is something I have personally built in my startups first early days. I want to bring up the early days to start with, the first few customers, because I think even for smaller B2B companies, that is the biggest challenge, going to get customers. And I wanted to bring up Stripe here as well, because I think Stripe got started by being in the Y Combinator. And they have so many startup companies that they can, be able to work with and get up as companies. And they use that to get the larger companies to use them, right? So that's kind of like their journey. But for you guys, it's a lot harder because you have to tackle those large businesses first on. Sometimes maybe before you even have a product, before you even have anything. So take us to, 2019 when Teal was just getting started. What was it like to get the first few customers?
Yeah, so I think the kind of journey for us went through a couple of different phases where, in the early days, we knew that we had a pretty lengthy software build ahead of us, where we were thinking, probably 18 to 24 months. It ended up being a little bit longer, of actual, software build out. And so, in the true early days, we were really going out and doing what I would say more like customer discovery. It really was not pre-sales. It was, hey, we really want feedback. Like, should we continue investing time and money into building out, this platform? And if we do, what features are important to you? What problems are you experiencing with the current, solutions? And so, we went out and ran this customer discovery process where we talked with dozens of software founders, and I think got pretty candid feedback from them, because it wasn't like we were trying to sell them something. At that time, we were a long ways off from having a product. We were saying, hey, founder to founder, can you give me, some insight into the market and into the, current solutions and the pain points that you had there. And so that was where we started. And I think I would certainly encourage anyone considering starting a business, that's a really important part of the product build process to get, that early feedback. And then, when you fast forward a little bit, as we were getting closer to having the product available, LinkedIn became a pretty important part of the journey for us, and frankly to this day still remains a pretty important part of the go-to-market motion for the business. But it really started with me just like posting about my experience and posting about the idea of like, hey, here's what we're building, like, do you guys find this interesting? And I was certainly blown away by the amount of people that reached out saying like, that is the exact pain point that we're experiencing with our platform. Can we set up a call? And so, I put out, it's probably over a year ago, I put out 2 posts kind of announcing the concept behind PayFac-as-a-Service. And just from those 2 posts, we had about 40,000 views on LinkedIn. But more importantly, we had 40 software companies that reached out to us that were like, oh my gosh, we're experiencing, all of these problems that you laid out in your post. Like, I'd love to learn more about the concept of PayFac-as-a-Service. And so, just getting that messaging out there costs us nothing. And, a number of those, are our current clients that work with us today.
I think so many things to unpack here. The first thing I think you said about validating the idea, which I personally think is very important, because I've worked with, many young founders, and I think the biggest mistake they've made is they build something before they validate it. So for you guys, was there anything specific that you've done besides what you just said about, talking to founders, figuring out anything else that you think might help?
Yeah. So for us, one of the things, the outcome being kind of the term PayFac-as-a-Service was really, trying to be a student of the market as much as we could to really understand the competitive landscape and, where we fit within the ecosystem, because that really informs your product build. If we had said, hey, we're building something for startups, we would have built a different product. We would have designed a different website. We would have designed, different marketing. If we were only targeting, enterprise customers, that would have been a different product. And so, we really spent a lot of time defining that ideal customer profile. And it was informed, by some of the customer discovery interviews, but it was also, some of it's like a gut feel of like, here's how the landscape is set up. Here's where I feel like the opportunity is. And so, defining your niche, defining your, ideal customer profile is super important, part of the process, because it really should inform a lot of, the build, the messaging, and the different parts of the process as you're figuring out your go-to-market motion.
Yeah, certainly. And I think one of the things, early stage startups face is that the need of pivoting a lot. So like for you guys, I know it's like, a predetermined concept. It's a very specific pain point. You guys validated it. But is there any pivot that you have done in the past couple of years?
From a pivot perspective, we haven't really changed much around the product or the market that we were targeting. I think the biggest change for us was in the go-to-market motion, where, initially we were planning a much heavier, like, bring in, BDRs and hire a bunch of salespeople and do a lot of, outbound emails, a lot of outbound calling, campaigns. And as we started to see the success on LinkedIn driving inbound, and then frankly starting to get referral partners coming inbound, we really shifted the go-to-market motion, as we were taking the product out to market, because we were just experiencing tremendous success, driving inbound into the business. But that was never the plan. Like, we didn't sit down and say, oh, LinkedIn's going to drive 90% of our traffic for the first 6 months, I would have thought you were crazy if anyone had suggested that is the plan. But the reality was, as we started to do it in practice, it was just working. And so we were just responding to, okay, this is working. And still to this day, we haven't really invested a tremendous amount of resources into an outbound motion, because we've been able to drive so much interest inbound over the last 12, 18 months.
Yep. And I do want to talk a little bit more as doing sales while being an early stage founder yourself. So for me, I'm not really a sales type founder. I think I'm more of a technical founder per se. So when I first started my first business, it was very difficult for me to get out there and speak to people and find out the go-to-market strategies. We had to do a lot of pivoting. And for someone who hasn't done sales, it's just very difficult. So Caleb, I know in the beginning of the podcast, we mentioned that you're doing door-to-door sales. And do you think that has helped you in building Teal?
Unbelievably helpful.
Okay.
And I think some of it is just the idea that I don't mind people telling me no. Like, you go out and you knock 25 doors, you might get one or two people that are even willing to talk to you. And so, that's a tremendous amount of rejection, that I was used to facing on a daily basis. And so, my attitude is like, what's the worst that can happen? I'll go out and talk to anybody and everybody, about Till. In worst case, they're not interested. It doesn't affect me. And so, I think if you can have that, sense of like self-worth from within, where it's like, I don't necessarily care if you're excited about what I'm building, because I'm just so excited that like your, energy and your response is not going to affect, how I feel, about, what I'm building. But it is scary, like getting out there and, talking about your baby, your startup, that you're building. But you just have to do it. You have to get out there and put yourself out there and try and figure out how to deal with that rejection, because the reality is people are going to say no. Investors aren't going to be interested. Customers aren't going to be interested. Employees, aren't going to be interested. But find the people that are really excited about what you're building and double down on those relationships. I think is really important for any entrepreneur.
Okay. Yeah, and I think most of the people that I just mentioned, the founders, including myself, the biggest fear is just getting rejected. Although, we grew up in such delicate times, I think. Like we don't face a lot of no's in our daily conversations, daily lives. But when you start doing sales, a no is a game. And I think a lot of people don't realize that getting no is part of the game. It's part of how it works. So what was your experience of dealing with rejection? I know you mentioned don't take it personally. Is there anything else you'd like to share about getting rejected?
Yeah. For us, as we were going out and talking with the early customers and early investors, every one of those pieces of rejection is actually pretty valuable feedback. If the investor is saying, hey, I don't like the go-to-market motion, or the business model, doesn't make sense to me, take that feedback and, maybe it's bad feedback, maybe it's good feedback, but, think through it. It's like, okay, well, why are they giving me this feedback? Why do they not like my go-to-market motion? Okay, they didn't feel like it was diversified. We were solely, focused on outbound. Let's add an inbound, or let's add, a referral strategy, and take that as, constructive feedback. It's not just them being mean. But most people that are offering you feedback and saying no, they're not doing it from a place of, hey, I really want to hurt George's feelings. They're just like, I don't get it, or I'm not excited, or maybe you're just not communicating the vision, or you're not explaining it, in a way that makes sense to them. And so try and take it as much as you can as constructive, criticism. I remember one of the best pitches that I ever had, and I'll use the term best in air quotes, was with a guy that I know locally, and he absolutely shredded my pitch. This was probably like pitch number 3 or 4 for me, and he just ripped me apart for like 10 minutes and just gave me all this feedback about, it was like, it felt like a lot. It was like, here's 15 reasons why I don't want to, invest in your business. And like, the first hour, I was like, man, really shredded me, but like, took that night to really think through it. And it's like, okay, well, that was fantastic feedback. And the next guy that I spoke with after that pitch, we actually got a term sheet from. And so, you've got to take, that feedback and see like, how can I learn from this? How can I change, what I'm doing, or the story, or how I'm, communicating it to try and get my point across, more clearly. And, at least for me in that moment, it certainly helped.
Yeah. I certainly wish I knew your feedback. I know I can rewind the last 10 minutes of this podcast and just learn about the sales questions. But I know you mentioned about investor feedback, and I think it is a little bit of a controversial topic in tech and startup because some people say you shouldn't listen to all the investor feedback because you know your business the best, right? For someone who's raising and getting a lot of feedback from investors, like what's your advice?
Yeah, I would definitely agree. You don't want to listen to every bit of feedback you get, whether that's from investors or your mom or whoever it is that you're getting feedback from. Not all feedback is accurate. And I think as a founder, you have to be that person that's going to interpret the feedback and say, hey, this is fantastic feedback. Let's go make these changes. And sometimes you just outright disagree with people, and you're like, you know what, I'm very confident in the ICP or the go-to-market motion or the pricing model. Like, I'm just going to do this, and let's see what happens. But like, log that in the back of your brain, and as you're going to market, if it's 8 people have told me they hate the pricing model, and then you get out to market, and customers also aren't liking the pricing model, or maybe you're wrong, but you have to be that kind of ultimate decider, because that's your job when you're the founder, when you're the CEO. You get the final call on what feedback are you going to take and make changes, and when are you going to listen to your gut, listen to your vision, and just say thank you for the feedback, but this is the path that we're going on.
Yeah, and when you're building Teal, like, do you seek a lot of other help or advice from other founders? A lot, or?
Certainly, yeah. I mean, I think for me, it was my first time being in the CEO chair, and frankly, my first time raising capital from this side of the table.
Yeah.
I've been the investor, offering capital, but it was my first time, fundraising from this side. And so, I mean, the first couple of years, I was always out chatting with people that were further ahead, in the journey that I was, to say, okay, what worked well for you, what didn't work well, and certainly paid tremendous dividends, for me as we were going through the early days building the business, and then, certainly in the fundraising process to learn, from mentors and other founders. And, I think other founders are a really great resource, because oftentimes they're just doing it to be nice. Like, it's not like they're expecting you to, pay them. Maybe you buy them lunch or something, but it's really just this like special relationship that I think, founders have, because they just appreciate the pain that you're going through. It's like, if I can help in any way and offer, just a little bit of advice or something that's going to make your journey even a little bit easier, I think most founders are happy to do that and kind of pay it forward, to people that are going through, the experiences that we've all, gone through, having built businesses. Yeah,
that's such a valid point. I think especially right now, during COVID, everything's virtual. For some founders, especially the founders which are starting out, I think it's sometimes maybe mentally difficult to think, how can I reach out to someone who's building a successful business? So like, when you reach out to founders, is it mostly through, cold outreach on LinkedIn, or is it, some other methods? Can you share a little bit more?
Cold email, cold LinkedIn. I am, I've been a cold caller for, many years, so I'm certainly not afraid to, send somebody an email. And, the reality is, if you're coming from like a genuine place of like, hey, I really value your experience, I would really like some help with, thinking through X, Y, or Z, maybe they don't respond, but that's the worst case. Worst case scenario, you send an email and it doesn't go anywhere. Best case scenario, they respond, you get time, and you get some super valuable insight. And so I guess from my perspective, I just feel like I had nothing to lose by reaching out to some of these folks. Some of them were investors, some of them, mentors, and some of them, other founders, but got a ton of, fantastic insights and advice that cost me nothing and certainly benefited, me and the Till journey.
Yeah, I think that's super valid. And I wish more founders would do something that you did by reaching out more, because I think certainly helps a lot. I started doing this a few months ago, actually, as a founder, and even speaking with you, Caleb, it has helped me so much. Even this podcast, this episode, talking to you, I've learned so much as a founder, and I wish I've learned, 2 years ago. So let's talk a little bit more about next. I think it's about expressing yourself and building publicly, because I know, Caleb, it's something that you're very passionate about. So I started posting more and more on LinkedIn because I saw your posts and I saw how passionate you are about, posting and building publicly. How did that get started? Can we just learn a bit more about that?
Yeah. I was certainly not a very active member of the LinkedIn community for most of my tenure on LinkedIn, which I think is true of most people. I think the stats are something like 1% of the LinkedIn community, posts on LinkedIn, which to me is crazy. at this point, because it's just such a tremendous opportunity to build your personal brand, your business brand, and get eyes on, what you're building. And it really doesn't cost anything other than time, to get that message out there. And, for me, as I think I mentioned a little bit earlier in the podcast, like it wasn't this like master plan of like, oh, LinkedIn is the key to, world domination. It was just like, I got started by just posting, about my experience and just trying to kind of share, like, here's what I'm going through, on a day-to-day basis as a founder, as a dad, just as a guy living my life. And I think I have been just overwhelmed by the responses that I've gotten, almost all positive, not always.
Okay, yeah, of course.
But almost all have been, overwhelmingly positive. And, for us at this point, LinkedIn is probably 30-40% of the inbound, that we drive into Tild as a business. And I think as we started to see results from posting on LinkedIn, like that's the ultimate feedback. Like when you actually start to generate revenue and sign customers, from the activity on LinkedIn, that certainly is pretty motivating to continue on in the process. But for me, it didn't start out that way. It wasn't like, hey, I'm doing this to attract customers. It's really coming from a genuine place of like, I want to share the experience that I'm going through. And if anybody else gets value out of that, then that's, rewarding for me. 'Cause I think that's really what it's more about, is just having that shared experience, and, how can we all help each other, grow our collective businesses.
Yeah. And I think your post is super awesome because it's mostly positive. It's mostly something I look forward to. It's like positive energy. So I'm sure a lot of people tell you that as well. So when I open LinkedIn, I don't want to see, some news about, people getting funded or anything like, which is great news, but, not very relevant to me as a person browsing through LinkedIn. But for your post, I think a lot of it is educational as well. The journey as a founder, the journey building Tild and all that. So how did you decide which content to post on LinkedIn?
Yeah, good question. I think there's a couple of different avenues around, how we post and the types of content that we put out. A big part of it is meant to be educational content. And so, pretty early on, a year before we launched the actual business and started to bring on customers, we hired a part-time content writer to work with me and interviewed me on a weekly basis, putting out blogs. So for me, like, I love talking about payments and I love talking about Tild, but if you ask me to sit down and write, a 500-word blog post, it's just never going to happen. I'm going to put it off, and I just know that about myself. Yeah. And so I brought somebody in who that was their specialty. And so, she would interview me and I could talk for, 30 minutes and do my thing. And then she would put together this content that was a million times better than anything I would ever write, if I sat down. But it's all meant to be educational content on different aspects of payments. And a lot of it's really not about Tild. It's just, hey, what is interchange? What is a PayFac? How do you think about risk? What is, PCI compliance? And so it's trying to introduce people to all the jargon that exists in the payments industry, and just try and distill it down to a place where like people can actually understand like what is PCI compliance, what is interchange plus pricing, because until you understand these concepts, it's pretty hard to make buying decisions about which partner is going to be the right payments company for me if you don't have that genuine level of understanding. And so I think we've definitely tried to position ourselves as a thought leader in the space and put out a lot of like free educational content that anyone can go to our website and just learn more, about payments. And then, on top of that kind of, blog, long form, educational content, a lot of it's me sharing my personal experience. Like, hey, here's what happened in my day today. And a lot of it's good. Like, we've been on a pretty awesome journey, the last couple of years. And so, sharing that experience. But, I put out a post last week. Like, we lost a couple of big deals that I really thought, we were going to win. And it's like, it hurt. Like, I was upset, that we lost those deals. But, like, that's what was going on, in my day. And so I think the thing for me is just always trying to be genuine, whether I'm having a really good day or if I'm, not having a good day. It's just kind of, this is genuinely the experience that I'm going through. It's not just trying to, put out, the kind of Instagram, feel good story. Look at me in my, that's not, the vibe that I'm going for. It's just like what's happening, in my day. And I think, people appreciate that, the kind of genuine nature of the content, and you're a lot more likely to have, positive results if you're posting kind of genuinely what's happening, with your experiences than just trying to like put on a show for others.
Yeah. Totally. And I think that's so important, Caleb, about posting about failures, because as an entrepreneur, there's no way that you don't fail. And, many of us fail on a weekly basis, or daily basis. Yeah. So I think, sometimes you look at Twitter, you look at other platforms, it's all about, oh, everyone's doing so well, everyone's doing so great. There's not much about, the pain points of building a business being mentioned. And I think that's so super important. So tell us more about, the what you just mentioned about, the large companies that you lost. How was it like, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we have a lot of big partners in our pipeline, but every deal is important. At the stage that we're at, with our business, like I care about every single one of our customers, and I'm still pretty intimately involved in the sales process for each deal. And when you're working on a lot of these enterprise deals, oftentimes you're in these conversations for 3, 6, 9+ months, and so you really get to know the people that you're working across. And so it's like, personally it hurts when you lose some of these big deals, but the reality is as you reflect upon it, it's like, what could I have done differently in the sales process, or was our product actually perfectly suited for these companies? And the reality was, like, our product actually wasn't the best fit for these organizations. It wasn't about price. It wasn't like we made this huge mistake in the sales process. There are some features, that we need to release on the platform to be a better fit, for these industries. And so, you take that feedback, you go back to, and regroup with the product team and say, like, hey, let's just be honest with ourselves. Like, we actually weren't the best fit, for this customer, and it's probably better that they didn't, sign up with us, because we weren't going to be able to offer them the experience that I think we want all of our, customers to have. But it certainly helps inform, like, hey, these are really important features, especially for some of these enterprise deals, that we need to get these features in place so that we're not going to lose a deal over a feature on the platform.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important mindset about learning from your mistakes and not really letting it get in the way. And I think that's what makes a builder an entrepreneur. You mentioned a lot about sales, so I do want to ask you a question about picking a sales leader, because I know for early stage founders, maybe when they raise revenue, when they raise money, or when they have really good revenue, they start considering when is the time I delegate sales to someone I can directly report to. So what was that like for Teal? Do you guys have a sales leader or anything like that?
Yeah, great question. I think the kind of point in time when you hire a sales leader differs for different organizations, and depends on the product that you're selling, depends on the skill set of the founder. It sounds like for you want to get out of sales, yesterday. But I think founder-led sales is a very important part of the process. Especially, for me, I'm also very heavily involved in the product build out and the product roadmap, and so being involved in the sales conversations is not only valuable in the sense that I think I can help close more deals, but it's also you've got your ear to the ground on customer feedback about the product and the pricing model, and that feedback is just so valuable, especially when you're getting it firsthand and you're hearing directly from the customer, like, man, if you had this feature, if this feature operated slightly differently, like, that's exactly what we're looking for. Hey, this part of the pricing model, isn't, resonating with me. That feedback is so important. So I think hiring a sales leader too early, I think, is a pretty big mistake that a lot of, founders make, where, for most founders, you're going to be the best person at communicating the passion and the vision, behind, what you're building. But you also need that feedback, from customers. We have actually just yesterday signed an offer letter with a director of sales, and so we've waited quite a long time to bring in true kind of leadership into the sales organization. But for us, we made a tremendous hire on our first sales hire, which is a really tough hire. Bringing in whether it's a sales leader or an account executive, bringing in that first sales rep into the equation as the startup is so hard because there's so much ambiguity. The product's evolving. Sometimes the customer profile changes dramatically, or the market that you're chasing changes dramatically. And so having somebody that has that entrepreneurial mindset of like, hey, let's figure this out together. And there's not a ton of structure, there's not a ton of process, there may not be a commission plan, but somebody that can really work with you to figure out the ICP and get to that product market fit, I think is almost the more important hire in the early days, where you don't necessarily need as much process and rigor around the kind of sales engine. It's really like, let's figure out what customers want and get that feedback, so that once we nail down the market and the ICP and the product, you can start bringing in sales leadership to scale out the organization and help the business grow.
Yeah, and I think that's so important about taking some time to hire the first salesperson, because sometimes when you hire a quick salesperson, like you said, things change very fast. And I think some salespeople are not very polite or friendly about that. For example, a change in the compensation structure, a change in the sales playbook. So I totally agree with you on that, Caleb. So now I want to talk more about growth, because I think it's something that you have posted. And let me rephrase that from LinkedIn. So I think you said 1 year ago, you guys just onboarded your fourth team member. And now today you have more than 40 team members on the team. And I just think that's such awesome journey. It's almost like 10 times growth, and it's such a hyper growth. So what was it like to lead a team from 4 to 40?
Yeah, pretty crazy experience is kind of the honest answer, because life just looks so much differently from my seat, my vantage point, where with 4 people on the team, every single one of those people, title is basically irrelevant. We're all doing whatever we have to do, for the business to win. And, everybody's got on multiple hats, and typically you're all in all the meetings together. Like, there's not a lot of meetings where it's like, oh, well, we only need 3 of the 4 of us. It's like, you just operate together, as a team. Whereas when you get to the point where we are today, over 40 people, I think, the next couple of weeks we'll have about 55 people on the team with all the offers, that we've had accepted over the last 2 weeks. There's a number of things that change. For one, people get much more specialized in the roles that they're in. It's not just, hey, I run, technology. It's like, okay, well, no, you're actually in, quality assurance, or you're in security, or you're, a developer. And so you get in these much more specialized roles where, your day-to-day is a little bit less fluid, and you have a better sense of kind of, what you're going to work on. But you also don't often have the entire team together. Like, it's pretty rare that we get, 45 people in a room together to have conversations. And so, the leadership level and communication and accountability and structure becomes so much more important, because, what I'm saying, how is that being translated, several levels down the organization? Does everybody on the team understand what the goals are of the business? What are the most critical things that we all need to be doing, on a daily and a weekly basis to drive, results within the business? And do you have the right leaders on board your team that are hiring the right people underneath them, setting the right goals for their team, holding them accountable? And then I think a big thing is the culture. How is the culture evolving as you grow? Because one of the things that I say is, like, every person that you hire and bring onto the team changes the culture of the company. Now, that could be good or bad, but the reality is, every person is changing the culture, especially the leaders that you bring on board. And so as you're hiring directors and you're hiring VPs, don't underestimate how important culture is in that hiring process, because they're going to be hiring teams underneath them, and they're going to be responsible for that communication downstream to their teams. And so don't just go chase the logo of, oh, well, they were at Apple or they were at PayPal, but geez, I hate the guy. You need to find somebody that has the skill set and has the right behaviors, but also kind of fits the culture of the organization. Otherwise, it can get pretty toxic pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I do want to mention more about recruiting, because many post-seed founders find that recruiting is one of their top challenges. And it seems like the growth for you guys have been tremendous growth. So do you supervise all the hiring, or do you delegate some of that to others?
Not at all.
Okay.
I think anyone on our team knows I hate interviews. It's like one of the things I just really don't enjoy, and I've always known that about myself. And so it's actually one of the early things that I delegated, where I am involved when we're hiring senior leaders, but most of the time I'm interviewing from a cultural perspective. Like, do I think this person is going to contribute positively to the culture of the organization? Because they've already gone through the stages of interviewing with other members of the team, where we know they've got the right background in whatever area, they're operating in. So it's not, at that point in the process, it's not up to me to interview them, for that. So certainly, delegate a lot of that. But, from a recruiting perspective, we've certainly been fortunate to hire as many people as we have over the last 12 months. And I think two of the things, that we've done that have been pretty crucial for that has been looking in network, just asking anybody and everybody, that we know, like, hey, do you know anybody that's a UI UX designer or product manager, whatever role we're searching for, like putting the word out there, far and wide to, our investors, to our friends, to people that we've worked with previously, and just, casting a pretty wide net. Has certainly, been beneficial, because a couple of the benefits of hiring in network, you're getting known quantities. And so, there are people that you either already know personally that you've worked with, that, they're going to ramp up faster. There's less risk in the hire, or they're coming from a trusted source where it's like, this is the best, product manager I've ever, worked with. You need to hire them. And so it takes, a little bit of the risk out of the process. You're also saving money on recruiting fees. And so in that pre-seed, seed stage, like, you don't have the funding to go pay, $40,000 or something for, a placement fee on, every hire that you're making. And so being able to organically attract talent is pretty important. And, even for us at this stage, we're fortunate to have, the capital that we do, but it also becomes about time to fill. And so, not only are you trying to, save money on recruiting fees, you're also trying to fill roles quickly, and especially the rate, that we're hiring at today. Getting those roles filled quickly is actually a pretty important part of keeping up with the growth, of the business. And so, aside from our networks, LinkedIn is pretty crucial for us from a recruiting perspective, where, I probably have 4 or 5 people a day reaching out to me on LinkedIn, asking what jobs we have available, because they're seeing my content, they're seeing Tilt's content, they're seeing, other people's content on the team. And I think one of the things that we've tried to do is, one, portray Tilt as like a fun place to work. I think we all enjoy, what we're doing, and I think that comes across, when people talk to us, about the business, but also talking about the bigger mission of what we're building. And for, a lot of, especially like senior level, like A players, they really want to believe in the mission of what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. You're not, as an A player, like your goal is not to go punch a clock. It's not, hey, I want to go work from 9 to 5 and get paid, and, I don't really care, what I'm doing. But most, really talented people want to be challenged and want to work at a place where they're making a difference, in a broader, landscape. And for us, the idea of trying to change the payment landscape for the better, and really, build something the right way, I think is something that has attracted a lot of people to come on board with Tilt, because it's a challenging work environment. There's a lot to do, and we have fun doing it.
Yeah, I was going to ask about, like competing talent, A players with, companies like Google and Apple, but it sounds like you guys have already done a very good job, on LinkedIn, so that people come to you. But do you feel the talent war going on for you guys? Because I think that's a top problem for C companies, to recruit talent.
Yeah, I mean, look, hiring is hard, and especially as you're trying to attract more senior level leadership to come on board. It is difficult, but I think for us, at least the feedback that we've gotten from candidates that we've hired recently, is that the culture of the team was actually a big part of the reason why they decided to come work with Tilt. We're offering competitive salary packages, but frankly, so is everybody else. And so, oftentimes the candidates that are signing up with Tilt, we know that they have 3 or 4 other offers. And so the question is, how do you differentiate yourself? If your only answer is, well, we're going to pay him an extra $30,000, that's not actually a very good answer. And I think for us, one of the big things that, and it's not even like we're trying to advertise the culture. I think it just comes out organically that like we've built a great culture within Tilt, and we have other great leaders that as people go through the interview process and meet the different members of the Tilt team. They're like, wow, I would actually really enjoy, working with this group of people on a day-to-day basis. And I think that's been, frankly, a pretty big part of our, differentiation, where a lot of the, stuff is table stakes. You got to have great salary packages. You got to have great benefits. You got to offer, employee stock option packages, but everybody's doing that. And so you got to find a way to differentiate yourself outside of just the comp package.
Yeah, and I think even for podcasts like this, like having be able to listen to the CEO talk, so confidently about the company, knowing so much about business, I think it just gives so much confidence to your, prospective employees in the future as well. So I think that's super awesome.
Anybody that's willing to listen to me talk for an hour, so certainly appreciate the people that are willing to tune in and listen. And if my experience resonates with them, we'd certainly love to have them, come join us here at Tilt.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so I think the final question from me, which is, I want you, Caleb, to look ahead at Tilt. So what do you think the next 3 to 5 years will be like for you guys?
Yeah, great question. So, for us, the core of the business has always been about this concept of PayFac-as-a-Service, and that's still, a big part of the mission and a big part of the journey that we're chasing. But I think our customers, being these ISVs and software platforms, have other needs that I think we're in a unique position to solve. And so, we plan to expand our offerings outside of just this core, PayFac-as-a-Service solution to help solve other pain points and frankly create additional revenue streams for our software partners. And so a lot of my, time and energy is going to building out, future product ideas. That some of these things won't see the light of day for, 24 months, but, working on it today, and, certainly hope to see the growth, trajectory only continue, to accelerate and get to, 500, 1,000 employees, within the business, because the problem that we're solving for is enormous. There's billions of dollars in capital that are available for us to process. And I certainly believe that we have the ability to go scoop up, pretty significant market share over the next couple of years. So I'm certainly excited, for what the next couple of years, have in store. But maybe I can get on the podcast in 12, 24 months and share, what the journey's been like.
That would be awesome. And I have no doubt you guys will achieve 500 to 1,000 employees very, very soon. I have no doubt. So thank you so much, Caleb, for joining on the show and sharing so much about, what you have been through as an entrepreneur, lessons you've learned, and advice that you've given. And as I said earlier in the podcast, when I just started 2 years ago, I wish I had listened to this episode because it gave me so much advice on everything I needed to know as a builder to get started. So thank you so much, Caleb, for joining the show, and hope you see you again here soon.
Awesome, George. Thank you so much for having me on today. This was a lot of fun.